In the vast expanse of space, there exists an unspoken rule among the civilizations of the Galactic Confederation: never, under any circumstances, allow humans to handle delicate diplomatic situations. This rule wasn't written into any official charter or treaty. Isco? There are Rather, it emerged organically after a series of what the humans called unfortunate misunderstandings and what everyone else called interstellar diplomatic catastrophes. Commander Jack Ripley stood before the mirror in his quarters aboard the United Earth vessel Goodwill, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform. The irony of naming humanity's first diplomatic vessel the Goodwill wasn't lost on Jack. Humanity had barely stopped fighting amongst themselves before they'd stumbled onto faster-than-light travel and promptly crashed into an established galactic community. "Commander, we're approaching the Confederation flagship." Lieutenant Penny Blackwell's voice came through the con. "The welcoming committee awaits." "Great," Jack muttered. "Nothing like being the new kids at space school." Jack had been chosen for this mission not because he was the most diplomatic human, far from it, but because he had an uncanny ability to read the room, even when the room contained beings with tentacles, multiple heads, or exoskeletons. What his superiors hadn't accounted for was his chronic sarcasm, which his human colleagues found endearing but which, as they would soon discover, didn't translate well across species boundaries. The docking procedure went smoothly, which Jack later considered the last thing that did. As the airlock cycled open, Jack and his small team were greeted by an assembly of beings so diverse that his human brain struggled to process them all at once. At the forefront stood High Chancellor Vauxian of the Trellix, a tall, willowy creature with iridescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions. Currently, they were a pleasant shade of blue, which Jack's briefing had told him indicated formal welcome. "Greetings, humans of Earth," Vauxian's translator device conveyed in slightly stilted English. "We welcome you to the Fellowship of Sentient Species. May our association be harmonious and mutually beneficial." Jack stepped forward with his most diplomatic smile. "High Chancellor, on behalf of Earth, I'm thrilled to be here. We've been alone in the universe for so long that finding out we have neighbors was like discovering we've had a surprise party planned for millennia, but nobody remembered to send the invitation." Vauxian's skin flickered to a confused purple. The translator paused, clearly struggling with the idiom. "You believe we have been concealing ourselves?" Vauxian asked, their color now edging toward an alarmed orange. "No, no," Jack laughed, attempting to salvage the situation, "just a little human humor. We're just happy to finally join the party." "There is no party," Vauxian stated flatly, their skin now a bewildered yellow. "This is a formal diplomatic reception." Behind Jack, Penny whispered, "Maybe ease up on the metaphors, Commander." Jack cleared his throat. "Of course. I meant we're honored to join the Galactic Confederation." "Much better." Vauxian's color settled back to blue. "Please follow me to the reception chamber." The reception started promisingly enough. Jack and his team were introduced to representatives from 12 major species and several minor ones. They exchanged pleasantries, avoided any obvious faux pas, and Jack began to think that perhaps this diplomacy thing wasn't so hard after all. Then came the traditional toast. "As is customary," Vauxian announced, "our newest members will offer words of unity before we consume the nectar of fellowship." With no warning and no preparation, all eyes, optical sensors, and sensory appendages turned expectantly to Jack. "Commander," Penny hissed, "toast. Now." Jack raised his glass of what appeared to be glowing blue liquid. To new friendships across the stars, he began smoothly enough. "On Earth we have a saying, may your enemies' enemies become your friends, and may they all buy the first round of drinks." The translator buzzed word, and finally produced something that caused Vauxian's skin to turn ash gray. "Have I," Vauxian asked slowly, "just been threatened with alcoholic poisoning by proxy?" And that was how, within the first 30 minutes of humanity's official entrance into galactic society, Commander Jack Ripley managed to accidentally imply that the High Chancellor's political enemies should be manipulated into buying potentially lethal substances. The aftermath of Jack's accidental threat was swift and chaotic. Vauxian's security detail immediately surrounded their chancellor. Several diplomats from warrior species reached for concealed weapons, and a small gelatinous being in the corner began to vibrate at an alarming frequency, their species' version of panicking. Wait. Jack raised his hands. That's not what I meant at all. It's just an old Earth saying about friendship and generosity. Penny stepped forward, her diplomatic training kicking in. Please accept our deepest apologies for the misunderstanding. Commander Ripley was attempting to share a cultural expression that translates poorly. After several tense moments and hurried explanations, the situation de-escalated, but not without cost. The Confederation representatives regarded the humans with newfound wariness. Jack couldn't help but notice that the drinks had been quietly removed from the reception. Perhaps, Vauxian suggested coolly, we should assign someone to assist our human friends in navigating our customs. That someone turned out to be Glexnor, a stout, four-armed being with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that could rotate 360 degrees independently of each other, a feature that made maintaining eye contact during conversation a uniquely unsettling experience for the humans. I am Glexnor, cultural attaché and xenobehavioral specialist. They introduced themselves, all four hands performing different greeting gestures simultaneously. I have been assigned to prevent further incidents. Babysitter? You mean, Jack muttered. I am unfamiliar with this term, Glexnor replied, one eye swiveling to look behind them, while the other remained fixed on Jack's face. I do not sit on infant humans. Figure of speech. Penny interjected quickly. We appreciate your assistance, Specialist Glexnor. The next cultural hurdle appeared at the formal dinner. The humans were seated at a table with representatives from 7 different species, each with their own unique dietary requirements and eating customs. Jack watched carefully as aliens around him used various implements to consume foods that defied description. Determined not to cause another incident, he mimicked the movements of a friendly-looking amphibious delegate to his left. Commander, Glexnor whispered urgently from his right. The Aqualian ambassador is filtering nutrients through specialized gills. Unless you have developed similar anatomical features since your species profile was submitted, I would not recommend this approach. Jack quickly put down the utensil he'd been holding up to his neck. Right. Thanks. What should I be using instead? Glexnor handed him something that looked like a cross between a fork and a small satellite dish. This will be appropriate for your physiology. The meal progressed with only minor awkwardness until dessert arrived, a delicate crystal bowl containing what appeared to be small, luminescent jellyfish. These are Blixian memory globes, Glexnor explained. They provide a mild psychic impression of their environment before harvesting. It is considered a delicacy. Jack stared at the gently pulsing creatures. So, we eat them alive? They are not alive in the sense you understand, Glexnor clarified. They are biomatrix constructs, grown specifically for consumption. Jack hesitantly took a small bite. The sensation was indescribable, somewhere between tasting a color and hearing a texture. He could swear he felt a fleeting impression of vast ocean depths and curious contentment. That's actually amazing, he admitted. Encouraged by his success with the memory globes, Jack reached for a small bottle at the center of the table, labeled with symbols he couldn't read. Perhaps, Glexnor began, but it was too late. Jack had already sprinkled a liberal amount of the substance onto his remaining memory globe, which immediately turned bright red and began emitting a high-pitched whine. Across the table, a reptilian diplomat leapt to their feet, knocking over their chair. A bloodfire spice. On memory globes, is this human insane? Is there a problem? Jack asked, fork halfway to his mouth. That combination creates a neural feedback loop that can induce vivid hallucinations in most sentient species, Glexnor explained hurriedly, removing Jack's plate. It would be like, I believe humans call it dropping acid while simultaneously experiencing all your ancestors' most intense memories. The reptilian diplomat was now pointing accusingly. Humans brought their chemical weapons to a diplomatic dinner. And thus was born the infamous hot sauce incident. That would become galactic legend, the story of how Commander Jack Ripley of Earth nearly drugged himself into a psychedelic ancestral vision quest at his first diplomatic dinner, and in doing so, convinced half the Confederation that humans casually weaponized their condiments. After the hot sauce debacle, the Confederation leadership decided to proceed with caution. Rather than immediately inducting Earth into full membership, they proposed a series of preliminary treaty negotiations ostensibly to establish the parameters for human integration, but really to determine whether humans were too dangerous to be allowed free movement throughout civilized space. The negotiations were scheduled to take place in a neutral facility specifically designed for multi-species diplomacy. The chamber featured adjustable gravity, atmosphere, temperature, and lighting to accommodate the vastly different biological needs of the attendees. Jack and Penny entered the chamber to find representatives from the Confederation's 5 most influential species already seated around a large circular table. "Let me handle this," Penny whispered. "I've studied galactic diplomatic protocols extensively." "Be my guest," Jack replied. "I'll just sit here and try not to accidentally declare war on anyone." Glexnor materialized beside them, all 4 eyes rotating in what Jack had come to recognize as their version of anxiety. "I have prepared note cards with appropriate responses to standard diplomatic overtures," they said, handing over small tablets to both humans. The negotiations began formally enough. The Trellix representative, not Vauxian but a subordinate named Melinar, opened with a statement of principles. The Draconian delegate followed with proposed terms for trade restrictions. The Quantum representative, a being that existed partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously, outlined security protocols. For the first hour, Penny skillfully navigated the discussion, referring to her briefing materials and Glexnor's note cards when necessary. Jack remained uncharacteristically quiet, watching the dynamics at play around the table. "The human female speaks well," the Draconian noted during a brief recess. The male remained silent. "Is this your species' negotiation strategy?" "Good speaker, silent observer?" Before Penny could respond, Jack laughed. "Nope. She's just better at this than I am. I'm more of a speak first, think later kind of guy. It's gotten me into trouble, as your Bloodfire Spice incident report probably mentions." The Draconian's slit pupils widened slightly. "You admit weakness freely? Is this a deception tactic?" And suddenly Jack realized he'd accidentally stumbled onto something. The Confederation species were so accustomed to carefully orchestrated diplomatic performances that his casual honesty had thrown them off balance. When negotiations resumed, Jack took a more active role, but not in the way anyone expected. Rather than employing careful rhetoric or strategic positioning, he simply asked straightforward questions. "So, you want to restrict human ships to designated trade routes because you're worried we'll contaminate your systems with our biology or technology, right? Why not just give us the sterilization protocols you use between your own worlds?" The Confederation representatives exchanged glances. "The human makes a valid point," the Quantum representative acknowledged, their form shifting slightly between dimensions as they spoke. As the day progressed, Jack's unorthodox approach continued to yield results. The humans were gaining more concessions than the Confederation had initially planned to offer, simply because Jack kept cutting through the diplomatic doublespeak with direct questions. During another break, Penny pulled Jack aside. "I don't know what you're doing, but it's working. They seem completely thrown by your approach." "I'm not doing anything," Jack insisted. "I'm just not playing the game they expect." "Thanks, Ken." The afternoon session took an unexpected turn when the discussion shifted to cultural exchange. The Aqualian representative, a tall, willowy being with translucent skin that revealed swirling blue fluids beneath, proposed strict limits on human entertainment being distributed in Confederation space. "Your species' dramatic works contain disturbing levels of conflict and emotion," they explained. "They could be destabilizing to more sensitive species." Penny was about to offer a measured response when the climate control system in the chamber malfunctioned, causing a sudden drop in temperature. The Aqualian's fluid-filled body began to stiffen visibly. Without hesitation, Penny removed her uniform jacket and draped it over the Aqualian's shoulders. "Will this help? Your fluids appear to be congealing." The Aqualian stared at her in shock. You would give your garment to an alien you are negotiating against. You're cold, Penny said simply. The negotiations can wait until you're comfortable. The gesture created a ripple effect. The draconian delegate, impressed by this display of what they perceived as selfless warriors' honor, immediately softened their stance on human military restrictions. The Quantum representative shifted fully into this dimension for the first time, indicating increased attention and respect. And then the Trellix representative made a fatal error. They offered the humans coffee. Melinar had studied human customs and knew that caffeine was an important ritual component of human negotiations. What they didn't realize was that the Blixer, a species composed primarily of electrical impulses housed in corporeal shells, had perceived caffeine as a mind-altering substance of terrifying potency. When Jack gratefully accepted a large cup of coffee and proceeded to drink it black, the Blixer representative began emitting alarmed crackles of energy. The human consumes nerve excitation fluid without dilution. Their thought processes will become erratic and accelerated. This demonstrates their inherent instability. Jack glanced at his coffee cup in confusion. It's just coffee. You drink it daily? The horrified Blixer asked. Usually hourly, Jack admitted. The revelation that humans voluntarily and regularly consumed a substance that would send a Blixer into fits of hyper-accelerated thought caused an immediate recess. As the delegates filed out, casting nervous glances at the humans, Glexnor approached with all four eyes fixed on Jack in what he'd learned was an expression of extreme concern. "The Commander," they said quietly, "you have just convinced the Confederation that humans are either incredibly resilient or slightly insane, possibly both." The negotiations had been suspended for a full day while the Confederation representatives debated privately about how to proceed with these puzzling humans. When sessions resumed, there was a noticeably different atmosphere in the chamber, a mixture of cautious respect and heightened wariness. A new representative had joined the proceedings, Ambassador Kraldox of the Mantidean Collective, an insectoid species renowned for their strategic brilliance. Standing nearly 7 feet tall with an exoskeleton that gleamed like polished obsidian, Kraldox commanded attention simply by entering the room. "The Collective has taken interest in humanity's petition for Confederation membership," they announced, mandibles clicking subtly between words. "We wish to observe these negotiations directly." Jack had read about the Mantideans. They rarely involved themselves in diplomatic affairs unless they stood to gain something significant or prevent something catastrophic. As discussions resumed, Kraldox remained mostly silent, their compound eyes constantly shifting between the human delegates. When they finally spoke, their question came without preamble. "Commander Ripley, do you understand the concept of diplomatic immunity as practiced in the Confederation?" Jack straightened in his seat. "Generally speaking, yes. It means diplomats are protected from prosecution under local laws while serving in foreign territories." A simplified but adequate definition, Kraldox acknowledged. And how would humans employ such privilege? Jack sensed a trap but couldn't quite see its shape. "Responsibly, I would hope. It's a protection designed to allow diplomats to do their jobs without fear of political persecution, not a license to disregard laws or customs." The Mantidean's antennae twitched a sign of surprise, according to Jack's briefing materials. An interesting perspective, Kraldox noted. Most emerging species view diplomatic immunity as a strategic advantage to be exploited. The negotiation continued, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just passed some sort of test. During the midday recess, he found himself alone in an observation deck with Ambassador Kraldox, both of them gazing out at the stars. "Your species puzzles me, Commander," the Mantidean admitted. "You display both alarming impulsivity and surprising wisdom, often within the same conversation." "We contain multitudes," Jack replied with a smile. "It's both our greatest strength and our biggest problem." "Indeed. This may explain your unusual responses to threatening stimuli." Before Jack could ask what that meant, the observation deck's automated system malfunctioned. The gravity suddenly fluctuated, the lights flickered ominously, and a loud alarm began blaring. Jack's instinctive response was to laugh, a nervous reaction to unexpected stress that many humans shared. To the Mantidean, however, this display of teeth and strange vocalizations in response to potential danger appeared to be a threat display. Kraldox immediately assumed a defensive posture, forelegs raised in warning. "Whoa, easy there," Jack said, raising his hands, "just a nervous habit. We laugh when we're uncomfortable sometimes." The Mantideans slowly lowered their limbs. "You express amusement when faced with potential danger? This is a common human trait." "Pretty common." "Yeah, that or cursing. Some people scream. We're a varied bunch." This information seemed to fascinate the ambassador. Most species have uniform fear responses. This unpredictability in humans, it could be tactically advantageous. The incident might have ended there if not for the unfortunate timing of a maintenance drone entering the observation deck to address the malfunction. The small robotic unit hovered directly between Jack and Kraldox just as the gravity stabilized with a sudden jolt. Jack, caught off balance, stumbled forward. The drone, interpreting his movement as a collision threat, emitted a warning beep and veered sharply away directly into Ambassador Kraldox's left antenna. For a Mantidean, antennae were not merely sensory organs but also indicators of social status. Contact with them by a lower status being was considered deeply offensive. The drone immediately powered down and dropped to the floor, its programming recognizing the diplomatic incident it had just caused. Kraldox stood perfectly still, mandibles tightly closed in what Jack would later learn was an expression of shock. "I am so sorry about that," Jack began. "The drone? You caused it to strike me," Kraldox stated flatly. "Not intentionally. It was the gravity malfunction." "You claim diplomatic immunity for this action," the Mantidean interrupted. And that's when Jack made a crucial error. Thinking the ambassador was offering him a way out of an awkward situation, he answered, "Yes, if that helps smooth this over. It was completely accidental." He had no way of knowing that in Mantidean diplomatic tradition, claiming immunity was equivalent to admitting intentional action while seeking exemption from consequences. He had effectively just told Kraldox, "Yes, I deliberately had that drone strike your antenna, but you can't do anything about it because I'm a diplomat." The resulting diplomatic crisis took 3 days and the intervention of 5 different species mediators to resolve. By the time the confusion was finally cleared up, word had spread throughout the Confederation, so humans had an unpredictable fear response and an incomprehensible understanding of diplomatic protocols. They were either incredibly sophisticated manipulators or dangerously unpredictable, possibly both. The strangest of all, Ambassador Kraldox emerged from the incident as one of humanity's strongest advocates. A species with such complex and contradictory behaviors, they explained to the Confederation Council, will either destroy themselves quickly or evolve into something remarkable. I find I am curious to discover which. Following the series of diplomatic incidents, the Confederation leadership called for an extraordinary galactic summit, a rare full assembly of all member species to determine humanity's fate. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Earth would either be welcomed into the galactic community or potentially quarantined as too unpredictable for interstellar relations. The summit was held in the Grand Amphitheater of the Confederation flagship, a vast chamber designed to accommodate representatives from over 200 species simultaneously. The humans, Jack, Penny, and a hastily assembled support team were given places of honor at the center of the chamber, which Jack quickly realized was less about respect and more about keeping them visible to everyone. "I feel like a specimen under a microscope," he muttered to Penny. "More like defendants in a very alien court," she replied under her breath. "Look sharp. The High Chancellor is arriving." Vauxian entered with a delegation of senior Confederation officials, their skin now a formal deep purple. Behind them came Ambassador Kraldox and representatives from dozens of species Jack hadn't even met yet. "This extraordinary summit is now in session," Vauxian announced once all was settled. "We are gathered to assess the readiness of the species known as humans for integration into the Galactic Confederation." What followed was essentially a trial, with various officials recounting the events of the past weeks. The hot sauce incident. the coffee diplomacy, the diplomatic immunity debacle. Each story seemed to elicit a different reaction from the assembled representatives, some of alarm, others of amusement, many of confusion. Ambassador Kralthok spoke in humanity's defense, emphasizing their adaptability and unique perspective. Several other species, who had positive interactions with the human delegation, added their support. As the testimonies continued, Jack grew increasingly uncomfortable with sitting silently while others debated humanity's fate. When Vauxian finally asked if the human representatives wished to address the summit before deliberations began, Jack stood before Penny could stop him. High Chancellor, distinguished representatives, he began formally, then paused. The prepared statement he'd been given by Earth's diplomatic corps suddenly felt inadequate. Instead, he decided to do what humans did best: improvise. I could stand here and promise that humans will never cause another diplomatic incident. But we all know that would be a lie. We're messy. We make mistakes. We put hot sauce on things we probably shouldn't. We laugh when we're nervous and sometimes say exactly what we're thinking when we should be more diplomatic. A murmur ran through the assembly. Glexnor, sitting nearby, had all four eyes closed in what appeared to be physical pain. But here's the thing, Jack continued. We learn from those mistakes. We adapt. We grew up alone in the universe, thinking we were the only intelligent life. Finding all of you out here, it's like suddenly discovering you have a family you never knew existed. We're going to make awkward conversation at first. We're going to accidentally use the wrong fork. We might even accidentally insult your antennae. This drew a clicking sound that might have been laughter from Kralthok's. But we want to be part of this family. We want to learn your ways, share our own, and figure out how we fit together. And yes, sometimes we'll drive you crazy. But I promise you'll never be bored. The chamber had fallen completely silent. Jack had no idea if his words were helping or hurting humanity's case, but he was committed now. In the spirit of cultural exchange, he concluded, I'd like to share a human tradition that goes back centuries. When we want to express how we feel when words aren't enough, sometimes we sing. And before anyone could stop him, before Penny could tackle him, before Glexnor could have 4 simultaneous heart attacks, Commander Jack Ripley began to sing an old Earth song about friendship and solidarity. What Jack didn't know, what no human could have known, was that the particular pattern of tones in the chorus closely resembled the formal war declaration of the Axelan hegemony, a militant species that had nearly conquered the galaxy 3 centuries earlier. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Security protocols activated automatically. Force fields shimmered into existence around various delegations, and several species with heightened auditory sensitivity writhed in apparent discomfort. Vauxian's skin had turned a shade of white Jack had never seen before. Cease this acoustic assault immediately. Jack stopped mid-verse, bewildered by the reaction. It's just a song about friendship. It is a Class 3 prohibited sound pattern, Vauxian exclaimed. How do humans even know this sequence? Penny was on her feet now. We don't. Commander Ripley was attempting a gesture of goodwill, not whatever you think this is. The confusion might have escalated further if not for an unexpected intervention. Ambassador Kralthok had begun making a rhythmic clicking sound with their mandibles, gradually increasing in tempo and volume until it caught everyone's attention. The Mantidean ambassador expresses amusement, a translator announced unnecessarily. Indeed I do, Kralthok confirmed when the clicking subsided. Do none of you see the pattern here? In every interaction, these humans have accidentally stumbled into our most sensitive cultural areas without any prior knowledge or malicious intent. They are either the most cunningly deceptive species we have ever encountered, or the luckiest, interrupted a gelatinous being Jack hadn't been introduced to. Not luck. Kralthok corrected. Chaos, creative chaos. They do not approach diplomacy as we do, with careful calculation and precedent. They, what is your phrase, Commander Ripley? Wing it? Jack offered weakly. Yes, they wing it. And while alarming, I find this approach refreshingly unpredictable. A heated debate erupted among the assembled representatives. Some argued for quarantine, others for restricted integration, a few for immediate full membership, Through it all, Jack and Penny sat in increasingly uncomfortable silence, aware that humanity's galactic future hung in the balance. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Vauxian called for order. Their skin had settled into a thoughtful shade of green. The summit will recess for deliberations, they announced. Commander Ripley, Lieutenant Blackwell, you have given us much to consider. 3 days later, Jack and Penny were summoned back to the Grand Amphitheater. The human delegation entered to find a much smaller assembly, only the High Chancellor, Ambassador Kralthox, and representatives from the 12 major Confederation species. Commander Ripley, Lieutenant Blackwell, Vauxian greeted them, their skin a formal blue once more. The Confederation has reached a decision regarding Earth's petition for membership. Jack held his breath. After everything that had happened, he genuinely had no idea which way the decision would go. Earth will be granted provisional membership status, Vauxian announced, under certain conditions. Jack exchanged a relieved glance with Penny. The provisional membership was better than quarantine. These conditions, Vauxian continued, include the establishment of a new diplomatic protocol specifically for human representatives. The Human Handling Protocol, Kralthox added, mandibles clicking with what Jack now recognized as amusement. That sounds slightly demeaning, Jack noted cautiously. Perhaps in translation, Vauxian acknowledged. The essence of the protocol is this: human diplomats will always be accompanied by a multi-species advisory team, specifically trained in human behavioral patterns and translation nuances. So we get permanent babysitters, Jack translated, for the safety of all involved. Yes, Vauxian confirmed. Additionally, human diplomatic facilities will be required to maintain dedicated misunderstanding mitigation chambers where cultural conflicts can be resolved before they escalate. Timeout rooms, Penny whispered to Jack. They're giving us timeout rooms. In return, Kralthox interjected, the Confederation acknowledges the unique perspective humans bring to interstellar diplomacy. Your species' capacity for lateral thinking and creative problem-solving may prove valuable in certain specialized circumstances. Jack wasn't sure whether to be offended or flattered. What kind of specialized circumstances? Situations where conventional diplomatic approaches have failed, the Mantidean explained. Headlocks. Entrenched positions. Cases where something unpredictable is needed. Vauxian's skin rippled with reluctant agreement. In fact, we already have such a situation developing with the Vex Collective. They have resisted all traditional diplomatic overtures for centuries. And you want humans to try? Jack asked incredulously. The Confederation has little to lose in this case, Vauxian admitted. And your species has demonstrated a remarkable ability to. How did you phrase it? Wing it in ways our established diplomatic corps cannot conceptualize. And that was how, despite every diplomatic disaster, cultural misunderstanding, and accidentally provocative karaoke performance, humanity found its niche in the galactic community. Not as the sophisticated diplomats they had aspired to be, but as the chaotic, unpredictable, last resort negotiators that the beautifully ordered Galactic Confederation occasionally needed, but couldn't produce themselves. 6 months later, Commander Jack Ripley found himself on a shuttle heading toward Vex space, accompanied by Penny, Glexnor, now officially Earth's first alien cultural attaché, and a diplomatic support team that included specialists in damage control, rapid cultural assessment, and emergency evacuation. So let me get this straight, Jack said to Glexnor as they approached the Vex border. After everything that happened, the Confederation is deliberately sending humans into the most sensitive negotiation in decades? Glexnor, who had developed a tolerance for human humor over the months of close association, rotated all 4 eyes in their equivalent of a shrug. The Confederation has created an entire classification for human diplomats, chaos agents. You are deployed only when all conventional methods have failed. We're the diplomatic equivalent of throwing a wrench into the machinery to see if it starts working again, Penny observed. An apt metaphor, Glexnor agreed. Though I would note that, surprisingly often, it works. Jack laughed. So the real reason every alien civilization keeps a safe distance from human diplomats is because sometimes we deliberately point you at our problems. Glexnor finished. Yes, the human handling protocol has two purposes: to protect the Confederation from accidental human diplomatic incidents, and to occasionally, carefully, deploy those same incidents where they might prove useful. As the shuttle approached the massive Vex mothership where negotiations would take place, Jack couldn't help but smile. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not by fitting in, but by being so utterly, but chaotically human that the Confederation had created an entirely new diplomatic classification just to accommodate them. Ready to make first contact with the Vex? Penny asked. Absolutely, Jack replied with a grin. I've brought hot sauce. Behind them, all four of Glexnor's eyes rolled simultaneously.